People assume you haven't married because you haven't found the right person. But sometimes that isn't the truth. Sometimes you have seen enough to know exactly what kind of life you don't want. You have watched people disappear inside relationships. You have watched love turn into obligation. You have watched two people who once chose each other slowly become roommates, rivals, or strangers who share a home. And somewhere inside you, quietly, without explaining it to anyone, something decided. Maybe that life is not for me. Not because you hate love. Not because you are incapable of commitment. Not because you are cold, selfish, damaged, or secretly waiting for someone to rescue you. But because marriage, to you, does not always sound like safety. Sometimes it sounds like surrender. Sometimes it sounds like losing the private room inside yourself. Sometimes it sounds like building your whole life around another person, then waking up one day and realizing you no longer remember where you went. And that is what makes this conversation uncomfortable. Because not everyone who avoids marriage is afraid of love. But not everyone who calls it freedom is actually free. Some people are choosing peace. Some people are protecting a wound. And some people have spent so long calling their fear independence that they no longer know the difference. For most of human history, marriage was not just a romantic dream. It was a structure. It was how people survived. It meant shared shelter, shared money, shared work, shared children, shared risk. It meant joining families, creating stability, and making life less brutal in a world where very few people could make it alone. So when older generations speak about marriage like it is the natural path, they are not completely wrong. For a long time, it was the path. Not always because people were deeply in love, but because life was built around it. Marriage was not just a relationship. It was infrastructure. But the modern person can survive alone in a way most people in history could not. You can rent an apartment without a spouse. You can earn your own money. You can build your own community. You can find intimacy without a wedding, companionship without a contract, meaning without arranging your entire life around one other person. And once marriage stops being required for survival, it becomes something far more personal, a choice. And when something becomes a choice, people start asking questions they were never allowed to ask before. Do I actually want this? Or was I trained to want it? Do I want marriage because it fits the life I am building? Or because I am afraid of what people will think if I don't? Do I want a partner? Or do I want proof that I am normal? This is where the old story begins to crack. Because for a long time, marriage was treated like final evidence that your life had worked. You grew up. You found someone. You settled down. You became complete. But more people are starting to understand something quieter. Completion is not the same as commitment, and being chosen is not the same as being known. Some people are not unmarried because nobody wanted them. Some people are unmarried because they stopped organizing their entire identity around being wanted. They may have love in their lives. They may have deep friendships. They may have routines, goals, quiet mornings, work they care about, places they return to, and people they protect. They are not incomplete. They are differently complete. They are not waiting for someone to arrive and make their life valid. They are asking whether the life they already built is worth disturbing. And sometimes the answer is no. Not bitterly, not defensively, just honestly. Some people are not waiting for someone to complete them. They are protecting the shape of a life they worked hard to build. But this is where we have to slow down. Because independence is not always freedom. From the outside, two people can look exactly the same. Both single, both calm. Both saying, I like my freedom. Both saying, I don't need marriage. Both saying, I'm good on my own. But underneath, they may be living from two completely different places. There is a kind of independence that opens your life. And there is a kind of independence that locks the door before anyone gets close enough to knock. The first kind is healthy autonomy. This is the person who can be alone without being closed. They enjoy their space, but they are not terrified of connection. They can love deeply. They can listen. They can repair after conflict. They can let someone matter without feeling erased. They simply do not believe marriage is the only proof that love is real. Their independence is not a wall. It is a foundation. They choose solitude because it helps them hear themselves clearly. They choose their own rhythm because it makes them more alive, not less available. They are not running from intimacy. They are just unwilling to trade their peace for a relationship that requires them to betray themselves. That kind of independence is not cold. It is honest. But then there is the other kind, avoidant autonomy. This kind can look strong from the outside. It can sound mature. It can sound clean and self-aware. I just don't want anyone disrupting my peace. I don't need anybody. Marriage is not for me. I like my life exactly how it is. And maybe all of that is true. But sometimes, underneath those sentences, the nervous system is saying something else. Don't get trapped. Don't need too much. Don't trust too deeply. Don't let anyone have enough access to hurt you. This is not the person who simply enjoys being alone. This is the person whose body starts to panic when love becomes real. At first, connection feels good. The conversation, the chemistry, the late-night honesty, the feeling of being seen. But then the relationship begins to ask for more. Plans, consistency, vulnerability, a future. The kind of closeness that no longer feels like a beautiful moment but a shared life. And suddenly something inside them tightens. They become irritated. They start noticing flaws. They need space, then more space, then even more space. They tell themselves the other person is too much, too needy, too emotional, too serious, too available. But sometimes the real problem is not that the other person is asking for too much. It is that closeness itself has started to feel like danger. This is the split. Healthy independence makes your life larger. Avoidant independence makes your life small enough to control. One creates room, the other creates distance. One says, I know who I am, so I can choose honestly. The other says, I cannot risk needing anyone because needing someone is how people get destroyed. And for some people, marriage sits right at the center of that fear. Because marriage does not sound like a celebration. It sounds like losing the exit. It sounds like every choice becoming a negotiation. Where you live, how you spend money, who gets your time, what your days look like, how quiet your home is allowed to be, how much of yourself you must explain before you are allowed to simply exist. For some people, marriage does not sound like love. It sounds like being absorbed. It sounds like becoming we before they have finished becoming I. And that fear is not always irrational. Some people have watched relationships swallow people whole. They have seen friends become smaller after marriage. They have seen parents give up dreams, silence their needs, perform happiness, and call it maturity. They have seen love become management. They have seen affection become duty. They have seen two people stay together physically while disappearing emotionally. So when someone says, I don't want to get married, they may not be rejecting love. They may be rejecting the version of love they have seen. The version where peace is traded for performance. The version where someone slowly stops being a person and becomes a role. Wife, husband, provider, caretaker, problem solver, emotional container. The one who always adjusts, the one who always stays. And if you grew up around a painful marriage, that fear can go even deeper. Because some people did not learn marriage from romance. They learned it from closed doors, from quiet resentment, from financial tension. From one parent crying in a room they thought nobody could hear. From two adults using silence like a weapon. From the strange loneliness of living in a house where love technically existed but no longer felt warm. Maybe there was divorce, maybe there wasn't. Sometimes the marriage stayed legally intact but emotionally ended years before anyone admitted it. And children notice more than adults think they do. They notice the tone. They notice the slammed cabinets. They notice how one parent stiffens when the other comes home. They notice how love can turn into obligation. They notice how people who once promised forever can become people who hurt each other with perfect familiarity. And later, when they grow up, they may not consciously say, marriage is dangerous. but their body remembers. So when a relationship starts moving toward permanence, they feel the old alarm. Be careful. This is where people get trapped. This is where love changes shape. This is where someone gets enough power to ruin your life. That is the tragedy. Some people are not avoiding marriage because they do not believe in love. They are avoiding marriage because they have already seen what love can become when it goes wrong. Sometimes the person avoiding marriage is not rejecting the future. They are trying not to repeat the past. This is why calling someone commitment phobic can be too easy. It explains too little. Yes, some people avoid commitment because they want endless options. But many avoidant people are not careless. They are overloaded. They feel more than they admit. They want connection more than they confess. They may crave closeness, but only until closeness begins to require surrender. Then their survival system takes over. They pull back, they disappear, they sabotage, they turn small imperfections into proof that the relationship is wrong. They convince themselves they are being rational, when really they are trying to escape the feeling of being emotionally cornered. And the sad part is, many of them do want love. They just do not trust what love costs. They do not trust that someone can come close without taking over. They do not trust that dependence can exist without humiliation. They do not trust that conflict can happen without abandonment. They do not trust that being seen will not eventually be used against them. So they stay unreachable, not because they have no heart, but because their heart learned that distance is the safest place to live. Avoidant people are not always heartless. Sometimes they are people whose hearts learn to survive by staying just out of reach. But pain explains the pattern. It does not excuse every damage the pattern creates. Because if you keep letting people get close just enough to hope, then push them away the moment they need consistency, you are not only protecting yourself, you are teaching someone else to question their worth. And healing does not begin when you find the perfect person who never triggers you. Healing begins when you stop calling every trigger a red flag. Of course, modern dating makes this harder. Because dating today does not only offer more people, it offers more exits. There is always someone else, another profile, another message, another possibility. Another person who might be more attractive, more compatible, more exciting, more convenient, less complicated. And the more options people have, the harder it becomes to choose without wondering what they are losing. Modern dating trains the mind to evaluate. Is this person good enough? Are they successful enough? Do they text the right way? Do they have the right lifestyle? The right politics? The right body? The right emotional availability but not too much emotional need? Are they safe but still exciting? Stable but not boring? Independent but still attached in exactly the right amount? It becomes less like meeting a person and more like auditing a product. And when you are always evaluating, you are rarely surrendering. You are not asking, can we build something? You are asking, is there a better version somewhere else? This is how commitment begins to feel irrational. Because commitment means closing doors. And the modern world keeps whispering that an open door is always more powerful than a chosen room. But love cannot grow in permanent comparison. At some point, every real person becomes inconvenient. Every real person has flaws. Every real person will disappoint you. Not because they are wrong for you, because they are human. And if your mind has been trained to treat every discomfort as evidence that something better exists, you will keep leaving people not because they are bad, but because they are not imaginary. Modern dating did not just give people more choices. It gave them more reasons to never choose. But even here, the problem is not only the apps. The deeper problem is what happens to a heart that never has to stay long enough to repair anything. Because repair is a muscle. Patience is a muscle. Compromise is a muscle. Letting someone be imperfect without immediately demoting them in your mind is a muscle. And if you spend years building a life where no one gets close enough to frustrate you, you may start confusing peace with the absence of challenge. This is where solitude becomes complicated. Because solitude is not loneliness. Loneliness is a wound. It is the ache of being unseen. The feeling that nobody would notice if your inner world collapsed. The sense that you are surrounded by people, but still emotionally starving. Solitude is different. Solitude can be sacred. It can be the first place a person stops abandoning themselves. It can be where you learn your own voice again, where you stop performing, where you rest without explaining, where you discover what you like, what you need, what you believe, and what kind of life actually fits you. Some people are not lonely alone. They are lonely in the wrong relationship. They are lonely being misunderstood at close range. They are lonely sleeping beside someone who has access to their body but no curiosity about their soul. So yes, being alone can be peace. It can be healing. It can be self-respect. A life without marriage can still be full of love. Friendship is love. Community is love. Service is love. Creative work is love. Chosen family is love. A quiet life you do not have to escape from is also love. But there is a hidden danger. If you build your life too perfectly around never being interrupted, you may slowly lose the ability to let anyone matter enough to inconvenience you. You may become less patient, less flexible, less able to repair after conflict, less willing to be misunderstood for a moment while love works through something difficult. You may start treating every request as control, every need as pressure, every disagreement as proof that your peace is being threatened. And this is how freedom quietly becomes rigidity. Not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly, until your life becomes calm, organized, protected, and emotionally unreachable. Peace is healthy when it keeps your heart open. It becomes a cage when every interruption starts to feel like a threat. So the question is not, is it good or bad to never marry? That question is too small. The real question is why. Why does marriage feel wrong to you? Does it feel wrong because you genuinely know yourself? Or because closeness makes you feel like you are disappearing? Does it feel wrong because you are building a life that fits your soul? Or because you are still living inside the emotional architecture of a home that hurt you? Does it feel wrong because you do not need marriage? Or because you do not trust love to stay gentle once it has access to you? There are 3 questions that reveal more than any relationship status ever could. First, when love gets close, do you feel calm or do you feel trapped? Not excited, not nervous in a normal human way. Trapped. Like the walls are moving inward. Like you need to escape before the person has even done anything wrong. Second, are you protecting your freedom or are you protecting an old wound? Because those 2 things can look identical from the outside. Both can sound like independence. Both can sound like self-respect. Both can sound like peace. But one expands you. The other keeps you safely untouched. Third, if someone safe, kind, and aligned came into your life, would you still reject commitment from clarity or from panic? Because there is nothing wrong with saying no to marriage. There is nothing wrong with building a life outside the traditional script. There is nothing wrong with choosing solitude, partnership without paperwork, separate homes, or chosen family, or a kind of love that does not need a ceremony to be real. Marriage is one path. It is not the only proof that someone knows how to love. But if your no comes from panic, not peace, then the issue may not be marriage. It may be fear wearing the language of freedom. And that is worth looking at. Not to force yourself into a life you do not want, but to make sure you are not rejecting life before it has a chance to become safe. The future of love will not have one shape. For some people, marriage will still be beautiful. A chosen home, a sacred promise, a place where 2 people become more themselves, not less. For others, marriage will never be the right container. Their love may look quieter, less traditional, less explainable to relatives at dinner, but still real, still loyal, still deep, still human. The goal is not to obey tradition, and the goal is not to rebel against it just to prove you are free. The goal is to build a life that does not require you to abandon yourself. So maybe the question is not, will you ever get married? Maybe the real question is quieter than that. When love comes close, do you still feel like yourself? And when you choose to be alone, does your life become larger or just safer? Because not every person who avoids marriage is broken, and not every person who wants marriage is asleep. The real difference is this: are you building your life from freedom or from fear? A life without marriage can still be full of love, but a life built only to avoid pain can slowly become another kind of prison.